Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello everyone. Today we will study and discuss some important events in life of the important poet in English literature. This poet is William Butler Yeats. William Butler Yeats, 13 June 1865 to 28 January 1939, was an Irish poet, dramatist, prose writer, and one of the foremost figures of 20th century literature. A pillar of Irish literary establishment. He helped to found the Abbey Theatre, and in his later years served 2 terms as a senator of the Irish Free State. He was a driving force behind the Irish literary revival along with Lady Gregory, Edward Merton, and others. Yeats was born in Sandmont Island and educated there and in London. He was a Protestant and member of the Anglo-Irish community. He spent childhood holidays in County Sligo and studied poetry from an early age when he became fascinated by Irish legends and the occult. These topics feature in the first phase of his work, which lasted roughly until the turn of the 20th century. In fact, Yeats became involved with Celtic revival, a movement against the cultural influences of English rule in Ireland during the Victorian period, which sought to promote the spirit of Ireland's native heritage. Though Yeats never learned Irish Gaelic himself, his writing at the turn of the century drew extensively from sources in Irish mythology and folklore. His earliest volume of verse was published in 1889, and its slow-paced and lyrical poems display dates to Edmund Spenser, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and the poets of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. From 19, his poetry grew more physical and realistic. He largely renounced the transcendental beliefs of his youth, though he is remained preoccupied with physical and spiritual masks as well as with cyclical theories of life. In 1923, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. On 14 November 1923, Irish poet and Senator William Butler Yeats created history when he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, the first Irish citizen to achieve such an award, considered as one of the most important poets of the 20th century who wrote in English. Yeats' works include plays, poems, short stories, and novels revolving around the Irish folklore and mythology, which are widely read even today. In 1889, Yeats met Mudgone. She was, look, Mudgone, very important figure, very important woman in his life. She was 18 months younger than Yeats. Yeats began an obsessive infatuation, and she had a significant and lasting effect on his poetry and his thereafter. Yeats' love was unrequited, means love from one side, in part due to his reluctance to participate in her nationalist activism. In 1891, he visited Gone in Ireland and proposed marriage, but was rejected. He later admitted that from that point, the troubling of my life began. Yeats proposed to Gone 3 more times. In 1899, in 19, and in 1901. She refused each proposal. Many of Yeats' poems are inspired by her or mention her. Few poets have celebrated a woman's beauty to the extent Yeats did in his lyric verse about Gone. In 1899, Yeats Lady Gregory, Edward Martin, and George Moore began the Irish Literary Theatre to present Irish plays. Look, this woman also played very important in his life. Lady Gregory was one of the moving forces behind the Irish literary renaissance. She was an Irish dramatist and florist. Lady Gregory produced a number of books of retellings of stories taken from Irish mythology. Yeats met the American poet Ezra Pound in 1909. Pound had traveled to London at least partly to meet the older man, whom he considered the only poet worthy of serious study. From that year until 1916, the two men wintered in the stone cottage at Ashdown Forest, with Pound nominally acting as Yeats' secretary. Ezra Pound is an American poet and critic. Pound promoted and occasionally helped to shape the work of such widely different poets and novelists as William Butler Yeats, James Joyce, Ernest Hemingway, Robert Frost, D.H. Lawrence, and T.S. Eliot. Yeats was an Irish nationalist who cited a kind of traditional lifestyle articulated through poems such as the Fisherman. However, as his life progressed, he sheltered much of his revolutionary spirit and distanced himself from the intense political landscape until 1922, when he was appointed senator for the Irish Free State. In fact, his interest in politics and Irish nationalism was reignited by the unexpected success of the 1916 Easter Rising. A further change in style followed with Yeats commenting on momentous topical events. Throughout his career, Yeats, the poet of Ireland, explored the themes of Irish folklore and myth, themes and settings to create modern, sophisticated poetry. The Irish themes come into his poetry as the remembrance of the glorious past, the myths and legends, the landscape, the horrors, the politics, and the criticism of English occupation. In 1917, Yeats proposed to 25-year-old Georgie Hyde-Less. Despite warnings from her friends, Hyde-Less accepted, and the two were married on 20 October. Their marriage was a success in spite of the age difference and in spite of Yeats' feelings of remorse and regret during their honeymoon. Look, only a few weeks earlier, Isolde, the daughter of Modgan, whom Yeats had loved for many years, had rejected Yeats' marriage proposal. Georgie and Yeats married just 3 weeks later on October 1917. The interest of Yeats and his contemporaries in Arabic culture was aroused especially after the publication of Richard Francis Burton's translation of the Arabian Nights between 1885 and 1887. The Arabian Nights influenced Yeats to such an extent that he was wishing to write some of his works in the manner and style of the Arabian Nights. Therefore, many of the most important poems of William Butler Yeats have been carrying Arabic ideas, either through their titles or through their themes such as The Gift of Harun al-Rashid, Solomon to Sheba, Solomon and the Witch, and The Second Coming. In fact, 1001 Nights, in Arabic ألف ليلة وليلة, is a collection of Middle Eastern folk tales compiled in Arabic during the Islamic Golden Age. It is often known in English as the Arabian Nights, from the first English language edition, which rendered the title as the Arabian Nights Entertainment. Yeats' Arabic interest located within the context of his interest in resistance, in terms of its emphasis on the culture of countries that have long suffered, as Ireland itself suffered under British colonial domination. The Eastern influence in Yeats' work extended to include the mystical visions found in Buddhism and Islam. He saw his own Celtic culture as rooted in the East, and his love of that culture brought him into direct opposition with modernity and motivated him, along with Lady Gregory and Saint to launch the Irish cultural revival. Today our lecture is finished, and we will meet in other subject. We will discuss his poem The Second Coming.